a yak or an ox or a horse or a mule, and maybe at the end of the day you could plow up something the size of this room, and then you could go out and hand scatter some barley or some wheat or some oats, okay? And then you could go in and hand hoe it so the weeds didn't take it over, and then you could come in with a scythe and cut it down and then shock it. And interestingly, the shocking is what allowed the grain, as it dried down slowly, to ferment just a little bit, which stimulated enzymes that allowed the gluten to digest in our bodies. One of the reasons we have such gluten intolerance today is because we're harvesting it so fast and drying it down so fast with natural gas that it doesn't go through any fermentation whatsoever, and so we can't tolerate the gluten. So here we are. We're going to scythe it down. We're going to put it in a shock, and then we're going to let it, dry down a while. And then we're going to take those shocks, take them in to a hard floor. Now, the hard floor can be, boards of wood. They could be, packed clay, but they could be any kind of hard surface. And then we're going to take, boards, and we're going to beat it, flail it, right? Okay. Then we're going to take a crude rake and pick up this beaten material, fling it up in the air in a breezeway. The air is going to blow off the chaff, and the heavy grain is going to fall to the floor. So at the end of the day, we get to look at the floor, and we get to pick up these few handfuls of grain, and then we get to try to store them for next year and for future bread baking in a time before sheet metal, wire mesh, where how are you going to keep it away from the rats and the mice? We're going to put it in clay pots. Okay? There's a reason why the biblical story in Hosea of a harlot being sold for 9.5 ephahs of barley sets the historical context. It's not because harlots were cheap. Because barley was expensive.
Harlots are never cheap.
Here's the point. Until this last 100 years, with cheap energy and machinery run by cheap energy, until then, grain throughout all the history of mankind has been way too expensive to feed to omnivores. So what was the role of the omnivore, the chicken? It was as a salvage vessel, a recycling system for the farmstead, the homestead, okay? And so that's why you always had a few chickens pushed very closely, tightly up around the kitchen and around any kind of food processing facility, was to take the peels and the blemishes and all that stuff and go right into the chickens as a recycling system. Today, we give Greedy Awards for people and institutions that separate out these compostables and put them on a diesel-powered truck to be trucked 10 miles away to go through a composting process to be sold back to people to, put around their flower pots. And we consider this as the pinnacle of ecology. That's crazy. What we need to be doing in our country is returning the omnivores, the chickens, to their historical role as a recycler of compostable waste products. So every kitchen in the country should have enough chickens connected to it in order to recycle your kitchen scraps, and then nothing has to be trucked anywhere, fueled anywhere. No compost piles have to be returned, and you get eggs as a byproduct of the recycling process. So now we don't have to have any industrial egg farms or egg commerce. Okay? Now, so I'm big on kitchen chickens. If you've got I know some of you, you don't have any land. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. You can go. You got an aquarium. I mean, a couple of chickens can be in a footprint the size of a fish aquarium. You got a couple parakeets. Get rid of the parakeets. They're obnoxious and
hard to eat.
Put a couple chickens in the cage. They're not nearly as obnoxious, and they'll lay you eggs and give you manure that's not toxic that you can almost eat. So
I don't really like eating chicken shit.
it builds your immune system.
It probably would.
Here's the deal. Many of us today have this deep down intuition that modern 20th century America, where the average person is far more passionately interested and knowledgeable about the latest body piercing and celebrity breakup in Hollywood than they are what's going to become flesh of their flesh and bone of their bones at 5 o'clock. That many of us are beginning to realize this entire cavalier, disconnected, self-infatuated culture is precarious, unstable, unsustainable, and is actually a charade. A charade. And so, what I've tried to do in this book is to take a fun little phrase, folks, this ain't normal, to pick out the glue and the ecological principles, soil fertility, and cultural things that are the ecological, historical, and economic community glue that has held civilizations together throughout history. That our culture suddenly, 100 years is still sudden. Are you with me? In the continued human history, okay, has suddenly thought, oh, we're above that. And we have in an incredibly profound way, abdicated many of the visceral relationships and responsibilities that humanity has had with resources, relationships, and economies. And then the book ends with a view of, I think, one of the greatest abnormalities we have in our culture now, where we have an entire bureaucracy devoted to making sure that all Americans know that Mountain Dew, Cocoa Puffs, and Twinkies are safe. But raw milk, compost-grown tomatoes, and Aunt Matilda's pickles are hazardous substances. That has never happened in human history. So what we're doing is we are filling supermarkets that have only been around since 1946. We are filling supermarkets with abundant junk. And so what we have are obese, malnourished people. We lead the world in obesity and malnutrition. We lead the world in the 5 chronic illnesses of cancer, diabetes, and I don't know what the others are. Okay? And we're supposedly this amazing culture that's supposed to be, the world leader. Well, if everybody heads the way we're going, they're going to, there's an old Chinese saying, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end up where you're headed. And I think that if we continue to depend on our military to secure oil fields so that this charade can float on cheap energy, our culture will not be what we grew up with. In fact, it will probably be unsustainable. It certainly will be unregenerative. And so my thesis is that sometime in the future, after we've depleted our soil, no culture has depleted its soil faster than ours. None, ever. No culture is stimulating desertification faster than America. In 100 years, Iowa, the breadbasket, Iowa has lost 50% of its topsoil in 100 years. What does that mean about the next 100 years? See what I'm saying? So my thesis is that the chances are, if we're betting with the historical normal track record and pattern, the future is going to look a lot more like the past in certain areas. Well, what are those areas? One of them is that we're going to be driven to our kitchens. Domestic culinary arts will have a revival, and we're already seeing that, domestic culinary arts. I mean, we've got people that for the first time are finding out that a canner doesn't blow up your house. No culture has ever remodeled or gadgetized its kitchens to the extent that ours has, and been more lost as to where they are. So we're going to begin cooking again. We're going to begin preserving again. We're going to think about seasonality and about eating seasonally. And we're going to look forward to the first strawberries in the spring instead of demanding that every party has fresh strawberries imported from Chile. And we're going to